sessions very positively, and certainly there were insights plenty. Thanks to Nicola, FinTech Scotland, and the crew that were on stage just before coffee for, actually, as ever, as we saw last year, being very candid with the learner journey that they have been on. We now shift our focus ever so slightly. You'll be pleased to know I've now got up-to-date notes in front of me. I should just have checked that before I stood up earlier on today. And we're going to take a look at what you need to do if you're hiring for that scale-up challenge. And if I may, I'm going to invite Ewan Anderson of Eden Scott to come forward and introduce the panel.
I'll just ask the panel to come up as well. You want to come and join us up here? Oh. Grab a seat, guys. I'm not sure if it is working. I seem to be the only person with Madonna's mic here. I'm not sure why. Thank you very much, Michael. So welcome along, everybody. As Michael mentioned, my name is Ewan Anderson. I'm the Associate Marketing Director at Eden Scott. So we help businesses get the right talent at the right time to help them grow. But we're very much finding at the moment that the main challenge is understanding the motivations of candidates. It is absolutely at the moment a candidates market. It's important to recognise that candidates are more than likely going to have 2 or 3 options when they're coming to engage with your company. So it's vital that you, as your business, everybody's talked this morning. It's been fascinating to hear that, in fact, most people have stolen our lines. We were just chatting before. Everybody's been talking about how important the people are. And the people are obviously vital to everybody's business. But it's very much a two-way process now. Gone are the days where people are coming in and the companies are interviewing people and it's up to them. The companies are being interviewed at the same time. And it's vital as an organisation that you really understand that because, as I say, most of these people are coming in and they've got 2 or 3 options. So, you know, companies are on interview as much as everybody else. And we've got some research out tomorrow, actually, that just highlights just some of the things that are putting candidates off when they're coming into that process. Some of the things around the number of interviews that they're having to go through, the lack of feedback, the changes in promises around salary and benefits. So it's really important that companies are prepared and ready to hire. And it doesn't matter, I mean, we were talking before, Hayley, you're scaling really quickly at the moment, and preparing and being ready to hire is so vital. And when it comes to retaining the talent as well, obviously businesses are you know, as you grow, you really want to retain your very best talent. And things like learning and opportunities and development opportunities are so vital. Part of our research has highlighted that 94% of people would stay longer at a company if they had the opportunity for career development. So all these things are vitally important. But what is great today that we've got a fantastic panel that really come across from all different aspects of this process. So we've got Hayley Raeper, who has joined us from xDesign. She's the people lead at xDesign. We've got Federico Charosky. Did I say that right? Yeah, go for that. CEO at Quorum Cyber. Reid, the founder at Frog Capital, and Michelle Lownie, who is the CEO and co-founder at Eden Scott. So I'll get you all just to do a brief introduction to your companies and to who you are, and then we'll get on with some questions. So Federico, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, nice. Thanks for having me. Federico Charosky, founder and CEO of Quorum Cyber. We're basically focused on cybersecurity services, right? So whether before, at, or after you're getting breached or hacked, that's where we get involved. So we do a lot with posture, detection, response, hunting, that kind of fun. So let's just say the target addressable market's been healthy for the past couple of years, which is good. We're about north of 200 people. We've been doubling year on year since 2017 when we created the business. We are now working across UK and North America. We are in the very lucky kind of break-even to profitable margin. We keep it at that. We're keeping it there for about a year. And we've received 2 rounds of funding, so back to the room. We were bootstrapped for the first 3 years. We did the first round of funding through great advice by Nikki Haley with the team from Maven and David Milroy's team, thanks to something that wasn't mentioned in the previous session that I thought it was a miss, which was the role advisors have. So we might be able to come back to that at some point, but it was fundamental to us to partner with H&H at that first stage, because I'm completely naive to investment. That wasn't I'm a technical CEO. So getting a good advisor to that first investment was fascinating. And then we had a great 18 months that led us to our second investment, where Living Bridge took Maven's position, and we've been with Living Bridge for the last 2 years.
Thank you. Mike?
Yep. So Frog Capital focuses on the gap that we were talking about earlier in the panel. We typically enter the story when the companies are around 50 to 70 employees, growing at anywhere between sort of 30 to 100% per annum. Our specialism is European software scale-ups, and I guess the passion and vision behind why we started up was we felt it was done pretty badly in the prior kind of decades, particularly when you look at the US. So we've really doubled down in terms of taking the best of what we'd experienced from the private equity world, like Living Bridge, and building out a framework of operating partners to help deal with some of the challenges that scale-ups are going to address in their journey to sort of 500 plus employees.
Thank you. Hayley?
Yeah, hi, I'm Hayley. Thanks for having me today. xDesign is a digital development partner. We've got a commitment to 4 key UK locations. We're over 10 years old now, but especially in the last 18 months, we've gone through a real period of hypergrowth. So, for example, I joined the business back in January 2022. We had about 150 employees. This year, we're probably going to close in on near 500, so I'm definitely puts a new meaning to working at pace. But we've also won some brilliant awards. This year, we were awarded number 5 out of the whole of the UK for overall great place to work, and we've placed first for women in tech and for well-being. So hopefully, I'm quite well placed to be sat on the panel with the experts today.
That's brilliant. Thanks. And Michelle?
Hi, yes, my name is Michelle Lownie. I'm one of the founders and chief executive of Eden Scott. We're an independent recruitment business. We're 20 years old this year. Yay, happy birthday. We have obviously been on our own growth journey over the last 20 years, some of it up, well, most of it up actually, some downs. But we've also supported many other Scottish startups on their journey. I think Shane Kirstorfen, if he's still in the room, I'm not sure if you remember, but we at the back, we had at one point of Skyscanner's growth about 4 of our recruitment consultants on site for about a 6-month period, just supporting the organisation to scale up. So very proud to be part of many organisations' growth journeys.
Good. So I wanted to start just with something that was on your website, actually, Mike, talking about the difference between, or a modern organisation, between a hierarchical organisation and a purpose-led company, and how important that is now when we're trying to attract people into organisations. People, certainly the feedback we're getting is that people want more than just a salary. They want to come and be part of something, and it was interesting to read that on your website from an investor's point of view. How important is that to team up with companies that have got that drive and that purpose now?
I think Hayley's going to have a lot to say about this, about recruiting 200 people in the last year. I think the challenge, the answer is clearly really important. The problem is, what the hell's purpose? And how does that translate to the people you're trying to attract? And of course, for me as the investor on the panel, the attraction, yeah, it's that one part of the hard bit, but actually the retention and the development is the even more important part. So actually, how do you retain really good people? Because once they're in, they're past the honeymoon period, and they really know the organisation and the challenges of scaling fast, et cetera, et cetera. You know, if they don't see the next phase of purpose and their own growth, they're obviously going to leave. So it's really important. The challenge we'll get into the panel is actually it's multifaceted.
But are you making decisions based, when companies are pitching to you, is it a conscious thing now to say, look, there's just not enough of a purpose there. We don't see, what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and that's a very sort of investor by investor issue. So I think it's ultimately, yes, Frog, you'll see the website, our passion is to back purpose-led founders. We have our own definition of what that is. And yes, we have a list of people saying, well, you're a great business, you just don't fit with our definition of what we're trying to do. That doesn't mean you're a bad business. So that's the important thing, I think, for founders and senior management teams. It's around your own sense, and then qualifying around, getting to know different investors and choose who's right for you.
Sorry, I don't want to keep going at you, but are you seeing that as a bit of a trend now in terms of investors and what they're looking for? And I appreciate your business is very focused on that, but are you seeing that as a trend across the market? Because I know a lot of businesses are going out for investment, and they need to understand what it is that people are looking for from an investment point of view.
It not only makes our team feel better, but I think, to your point, I think it is an absolutely transformational change that's going on. Quite a lot of it's bottom down. and maybe you see this with private equity, but pension funds, insurance companies are investing a lot of money into private equity, growth capital, venture capital, and they are becoming much more sensitive around, yes, we call it sort of three-letter acronyms, whether it be ESG or something else, but ultimately they're demanding a more modern approach to society, and so that is percolating down slowly. Michael can talk about this a lot, and then I think the bottom-up side from a team's point of view and from an investor's point of view is larger companies want to buy companies that have that modern way of running. Why is that? Because they want to ingest that culture into their companies and revitalize their own large legacy. We've all worked for large companies. It's super tough, and one of the reasons people will buy your two businesses is not just the financial return, the strategy, the product, but it will also be, I want Federico in my business because I know we can change that unit and be a more modern environment.
Yeah. So Hayley, how tough is this to create that purpose-led business then?
Oh, purpose. I could talk about this for hours. It's so
By the way.
important, isn't it? And yeah, catch me after. Your purpose, everybody's got to buy into your purpose. So you as founders, as leaders, need to be able to talk about your purpose in depth and get buy-in from your people, because without your people seeing a purpose, you're going to struggle to retain them. They want to buy into that vision that you're leading with. And you mentioned, the job market, it's tough out there. Like job seekers have a choice. Mm-hmm. They need to buy into that purpose and join your organisation. We're finding now when recruiting, we're being interviewed, which I love. But Hayley, can you tell me about your CSR strategy for 23-24? These were questions that weren't being asked. Yeah. 5 years ago even, people want to buy into that purpose and that values driven, and I think xDesign is probably a little bit of both. Right. We're definitely evolving at the pace that we are growing. For a long time, we didn't have a hierarchical structure, but we've brought in a newly formed ELT team, so we've got specialists in that area. We've got much more of a peer group in that area now, to ensure that our departments are aligned, and they're aligned with the wider business model as well. I'd say we're still very purpose-driven around the why. Mm-hmm. That's still very important, but that's also still evolving. So we want to unleash our clients' potential, like that's the North Star of the business, but so is our purpose, our culture, and our values, and they'll drive and work in alignment with each other.
And Federico, is it the same for yourself? When you were starting out, was it very purpose-led at the start, or is this something that's evolved as you've grown?
I think we've been very lucky in that the space that we occupy, where you're fighting hackers and you're fighting bad people to help good people, it's a pretty easy way to connect to a purpose. I think it's not that wasn't the challenge. I think if I can be, again, channeling my inner Shane, a bit controversial, is because everybody's talking and focusing so much on purpose, I think you see a lot of performative efforts to talk about purpose because we have to have one. Yeah. So everybody wants to put something on a wall and find their purpose and find their way. And I think, yes, it's important, but I think forcing businesses to have to artificially create one sometimes feels the wrong investment of energy. Yeah. And it's okay if it takes a while for you to find your purpose. Mm-hmm. You can still have a great business. And I think I've seen a lot of my peers kind of really struggle to find, we need to really find a We Fight Bullies equivalent, which is ours. And that forces people into a corner that I think is not necessarily productive all the time.
I think that's it, isn't it? That it's not to find the purpose that's aligned to you, it's to find the purpose that's aligned to your business, and it's very much about spending a bit of time, because you're not trying to attract everybody to come work for your business. You're trying to attract the people who will align with your purpose and your vision and values. And that's the same from sorry, Mike, were you going to say? Michelle, we find that a lot, that people are looking for more than that, more than just a salary. It's they want to be involved with purpose-led businesses, would you say?
I think it's probably a combination of lots of different things, and I think organisations' purposes change, depends on markets, what's happening in various different sectors, etc. But yeah, absolutely, people want more than a basic salary, and now people, are able to get that. We've all seen an absolute shift in the market in the last couple of years, thanks to COVID. The gift that keeps on giving in relation to that. And I think organisations are still really struggling to get it right in terms of that model of hybrid working from home, different offices, etc. without having to kind of mandate things. People will come into an office if they want to come into an office, unless they're being mandated to come in. They'll suit their own ends to a certain extent, but absolutely it's more than just about that basic salary. It's what are they going to get out of that, and what's their own growth journey going to be on, because many people start in an organisation in one space, but actually have a lot of ambition and want to end up in different roles. And does the organisation have the ability to be able to feed their desire to progress as well?
Sorry, Mike, were you going to say something before?
Yeah, I've got 2 books for you. That was my thinking about the panel today. So the 2 takeaways from Mike will be, I see this particular area as sort of 2 concentric circles. The top one is all around the purpose, the vision, the entrepreneurial piece that we were talking about earlier. So part of the reason why someone might really enjoy wanting to join a company, I really believe in Federico or Hayley, it's like that kind of thing. The book there is a book called Belonging by Owen Eastwood. A lot of the work he's done is in football teams and rugby teams. He did a lot of work with the Scottish rugby team. And it's more than just the purpose for me. It's much more in depth, and it's much more around that feeling that we all know of, when I feel like I belong in that team. I know what that feels like, and guess what? I know what it feels when I don't belong. And I think that's a really fascinating area through any organisation, but particularly scale up, because you can have it for a long time as an individual, and then you can lose it in one meeting or one interaction with your boss or some senior person in the team. So a fascinating sort of softer piece around what does belonging feel. And then the other piece, the bottom concentric circle, is about the operations and how the business is actually run. Because I think what we see a lot is that, God, I've enjoyed that. I joined the company because it was so exciting, but I just couldn't run a piss up in a brewery. I mean, I loved all the stuff, but ultimately, I didn't get paid on time. I didn't get clarity on my reviews. I didn't get considered for promotion. It wasn't clear. So all that piece is absolutely fundamental. And the book there is a book called Traction, which has been recommended. It was like the 4th entrepreneur recommended it to me proactively. I was like, shit, I've got to go and read this book. And it's a bit just like a kind of operating system of how to run a scale up. But boy, it's just fantastic, just the basics.
We've adopted Traction a year ago, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's been really good.
I tell you what, that first book must be a good one if we can get the Scottish rugby team to win. Must be that's a one. That's for everybody. So I suppose a big part of this is culture. You have your purpose, but it's then building a culture, because I know people walk in and they go for that job, and they walk in and it's just as you said, it's completely different to what I was promised. So how do you go about maintaining that culture as you grow? You were talking earlier on about your expansion across the States. It must be hard to try and maintain that culture, the culture of who what your organisation was as you expand. How do you go about that?
Interesting. So I think the challenge starts also with the definition of what is culture. Like, how do you define the term culture? John Wallace, our Chief People Officer, defines it provocatively as the worst behaviors we're willing to tolerate, which I find a very Irish articulation of the word culture. But there's something in that for me, right? Because culture, yes, it evolves, it changes. It has to be a reflection of your behaviors. It has to be how you actually behave, not just how you say you behave. But I think as you scale up, as you're growing through and shooting through phases of growth more rapidly that you know what to do with, you flex, right? You adapt, you pivot all the time as to how you behave to go through those phases. And how you behaved when you were 30, it's probably going to be very different to how you behave when you're 200, and it has to.
Yeah.
So I think you need to have a certain amount of control and rudder of what is that, but at the same time allow yourself a flexibility. If you're going to try to be the same and behave the same way that you behaved when you were 30, at least in my experience, and this is true to our journey, I don't know who else's, we would have completely failed. So allowing ourselves the ability to continuously evolve in that growth and make conscious trade-offs. We talk a lot about conscious trade-offs all the time, and just not emulate the past because the past was what it was, and try to adapt for what's the right shape and behaviors today.
Yeah. And is it founded in something core? You've got that ability to flex, but there's a core at the heart of your business that really means that while we do flex as we grow and we develop and but there's something at the heart there that will always be Quorum.
And I think that's purpose, right? So that's probably what connects most to, is this helping our customers win? Is this helping us fight bullies the way we want to? If some of those moral compasses kind of maintain that north direction, you can then take quite a lot of freedom in how you play in the field, but you kind of need to know where you're headed. I think that's fundamental.
And is that something you've done at xDesign, Hayley?
We have, but it's not without its challenges. You know, maintaining a culture at 50 people is much easier than 500 people. So I think it's important to ensure you have a really strong kind of values-led culture, and you're not afraid for that, like you mentioned, for it to evolve. It will, it's natural, it's part of the growth. At xDesign, to help maintain that culture in this period of hypergrowth, we've created things like communities in DEIB, well-being, neurodiversity, and we've held my experience of sessions as well, and that's really increased that engagement, that culture, and that sense of belonging within the business as well. And we also, because we make mistakes, we're all human, so we run regular learning from failure sessions, and my CTO mentioned that once, like failure, it's not a dirty word. we all fail, and we just want to avoid that blame culture, and we want to increase that psychological safety. So teams are encouraged to talk about why things have failed. We take those learnings, we move forward to constantly improve our ways of working. And I think it's really important as well to maintain your own culture. Don't try and copy and paste it from somewhere else, you know. Take ideas, maybe take best practices, but really your culture, your values will be made from who you are as a business and what that looks, what that feels like for you and your people, and just be confident around your purpose as well as a business. And I think my advice would be, you know, over-communicate, be transparent as leaders, as founders, because your people will really, really thank you for that as well.
And I don't know if you've seen it, mind if I
you go.
respond to that? So I don't know if you've seen it in your journey or how you've seen it materialize, but one of the mistakes we were making very early on was try to desperately bring everybody along for the journey. Like we were obsessed with, if you chose us at that stage, you have to have a place at this stage. And I think what we've, again, made our peace with is that we don't need to make a culture that is for everyone. And that it's okay that people that join you at the beginning choose not to be part of that second stage. It's not personal, and it feels personal, especially when you're the founder, like everyone feels personal to you. But learning to cope with that natural okay churn, not the unokay churn, was something that took us quite a while to figure out. I know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our CEO, when the first few people resigned, because it's natural.
It's a breakup. It feels like a breakup.
He was like, why? Why have they resigned? I need more detail. But it's natural. It's the change. It's part of an evolving process. And yeah, it's just one of those things.
Mike, is that something you keep an eye on from an investor point of view when maybe you're looking at productivity? Do things start to change? Do you start to see a change in the culture an organization you're maybe working with and say, look, is this an issue, or is it something you leave very much to the leadership team and just say, look, you know, you guys get on with it and make sure it's working?
Yeah, I mean, as an investor, typically a non-exec director on the board, I mean, it's very nigh on impossible to really have a pulse of the culture. So that self-awareness that you just can't do that is actually really important. I think what's key to a good advisor non-exec input is around reminding the team of the sheer scale of the challenge of, you know, if you want to be world class, wow, are you up against some, you know, huge competition? So kind of suddenly with that sort of perspective, I think, and not in a nasty way, but just keep reframing that sort of where are we going, where's the vision, it brings into perspective some of the smaller, I wouldn't say smaller, but some personal, quite emotional decisions, like, you know, so-and-so, should we keep that person, whatever. With that bigger perception, it's not even a question.
Yeah.
It's like, well, of course, we've got to move on. That's just part of moving on. If we're going to get over there, you know, we're spending too much time talking about it now. So I think having that in place, I think then clearly the focus is around the senior team, the senior leadership team, both the individual players on the pitch, but also, as importantly, the way they are working together through the leadership of the company. Big advocates of coaching of all of the senior leaderships, different coaches for different people, but also for the team to have a coach as well, because there's so much change going on. You're going to add on, you will, and you should be adding on new senior team leaders. You might be a new CTO or a new head of sales or whatever. You know, bringing just one person into a team of 6, it's a huge change, you know, how it upsets the whole thing again. So you've got to get back on your game and work together, etc. So there's a lot to do that, and that's where I think the board plays a really important role.
Okay. And Michelle, from your point of view, when people are coming for those senior roles, perhaps, is that one of the first questions they ask about the culture of the organisation? Do they want a real sense of that? Because if they're going in there and it's a challenging place to be, obviously it becomes a different decision for them.
I think culture is a really interesting topic because it can mean many different things to many different people all working in the same organisation. And I think your culture changes and adapts over time. I also think that it's really important not to be too prescriptive about that culture. And again, I would come back to that hybrid working. How do you foster, that culture when you've got half of your workforce or 90 or 80% of your workforce working from home? That's quite a difficult thing to do. But sure, when people are coming for roles or speaking to our organisation about, working with other companies, it is what does that culture piece look like? And that's actually really difficult to explain. We're speak to Mike and say, what's your culture? And you tell me, and I go and I tell that candidate. Actually, they have to go in and they have to find that out for themselves. They've got to ask their own questions. Culture, for me, I think, is about good behaviours. It's about good values. It's about treating people with dignity and with respect. It's about giving people the opportunity to grow with an organisation and to develop their careers. I think if you over-manufacture a culture, you are in danger of it being, not being true to a certain extent. I think the big focus should be on not having a culture that is bred on toxicity.
And if I can go back to the senior team comment that was being mentioned, and I think that's probably the ask, if I was to make an ask of the investment community, or one of the opportunities for the investment community to partner both with recruitment talent firms and headhunting firms and investees, is the CEO that comes from a tech background, first-time CEO, I don't have pattern recognition for some of the key roles like a chief financial officer or a chief sales officer. That's not been my gig, right? So I came from a technology background, second startup, but I come from what I know how to do. I know how to do cyber, I know how to sell. That's it. I don't know how to hire a great CFO. And I think one of the key roles that we've been very lucky to partner with both our investors over time has been to have an active investor that could help us make better decisions for some of those fundamental roles. And we've made our fair share collection of mistakes in our journey. And I think that's something that we need to probably talk more about, to how do you select for the right, not just fit, but the right skills, the right aptitudes, the right moment in time for your journey. We've been dreadfully bad at that. And I think we with the community that we have, we should be doing a lot better about better pattern recognition for those who haven't been through 50 CFOs before, or CTOs or CSOs.
Yeah, we had a good example, business called Clue in Bristol, and we were looking for a new CTO, and Claire met, and working with our tech operating partner, basically she kept on rejecting all of them, and Andrew was like, oh, come on, Claire, this is, he's a decent guy, this one, why don't you, no, it doesn't fit, I don't know what it is. She was right, of course. So she managed to persuade him to become interim CTO for 18 months, which he did. And then, of course, the business scaled to the next level. When we went to market again for a CTO, we had a completely different quality of candidate base, and now we've got a fantastic CTO. So timing, to your point, is really important.
And does it become the blueprint for your organisation? We talked about this before, where you were looking at hires and you were saying, look, this person just doesn't fit, because we're actually going to start with the culture first, and then we're going to look at the technical skills. Is that where it becomes the blueprint for your hiring? Is that right?
Yeah, so we have kind of two sets of interviews. We have our technical interview, but we also have introduced this year a values interview, and both are equal in value. So if you don't pass the culture and values interview, you're not going any further. You could be you could be an engineering genius, but you won't go any further if you don't pass that. If you haven't got our values somewhere within you, you won't be the right fit for us.
And does that culture have to come from the very top? I mean, it has to be driven by the leadership, I guess, because we talked about this before, but if the leader doesn't buy into it, doesn't follow those values, then actually it's almost a relief for everybody else on the mid-management level to say, well, actually, if the leader doesn't do it, then it doesn't really matter, and that's where it starts to fall apart. Is that right?
I think if not everyone's bought into the values and the purpose and the vision of the organisation, well, if your CEO's not, if your C-suite aren't, how can you expect your employees to buy into that vision and purpose as well?
Yeah. I think the challenge is more complex than that, because for a successful business, you're going from 50, 100, 500. You might have, to oversimplify it, you might have your kind of lovely entrepreneur, one of co-founder, Claire. Oh, she's fantastic. She's such a nice, she's always really warm. And then you got your Mike, and he's the operator guy. So she deals with all the nice things. And then Mike comes and goes, no, we're not paying you anymore. You've got to deliver more. So of course, the good news is, I think this generation of scale-ups is so much more open to, I want to be with a high-performing team. I want to perform best. I'm okay with challenge, as long as it's fair, consistent. So performance management is not a dirty word, dirty phrase. It's an absolute must if we're going to compete at the global level. The issue for an organisation, it has to come consistently right through. And that's where one of the biggest challenges we see for scale-ups is actually middle management training. When you're growing so fast, you forget that. And then you suddenly wake up one morning thinking, well, I've got this problem. Well, because I have a bunch of managers who can't deal with contention. They're not managing in a way that they should be.
Mike, you're ruining my order here. Mid-management was next. So that takes us on to mid-management, actually. And it's something that we talked about. So we all caught up as a group before this. And just to really understand what the challenges are for scaling businesses. And mid-management became one of these things that people said, look, this is an issue for us. So we have technical skills, people who have great technical skills that maybe aren't the leaders that we need them to be. And is that it was yourself that mentioned it, Federico, is that the real challenge for some of these organizations that are scaling? And how do you go about dealing with that, I guess?
I think it's one of the key existential level events that you go through in the scale-up journey is if you don't get that right quick enough, you can really, if not disappear, you can really get into a quagmire of situations that you don't know how to unravel. And again, I've learned these lessons by making every mistake that you can possibly imagine. So first of all, I hired every C-level executive wrong, and I had to replace them. Then I promoted everybody from a technical field into management levels, and I realized I was a completely different thing. So this was not done in any form of retrospective kind of knowledge. I stumbled up in every single one of these. But one of the things that unlocked us in the last kind of 18 months or so, probably since the Living Bridge investment, was that realization that we have what we call a tier 5 executive level, and that's good now, really solid. But we had a vacuum at tier 4s, tier 3s. And we had at best tier 2 people, and that's not tier 2 capability people, that's fine, but operating maybe in tier 3 roles with nothing in tier 4. So there was a complete vacuum of how do we do performance management? So yes, culture is great, is required, but it's not sufficient. There has to be performance managed as well. Yeah. And when you promote people that came with you from the early journeys because of a misplaced of loyalty, it's not misplaced, but there's a sense of loyalty that plays into that. You're not selecting for the people that have the right skills for those tiers that you now need, that you didn't need a year ago. And you can make some dramatic mistakes. You can hurt a lot of people that you really love because you're putting them in positions where they're not capable to perform to what you now need. And part of that challenge is you need a team that can keep up with the level of growth. So to unpick all of that dynamic requires quite a lot of sage advice that changes in the stages. And I think, again, that's where the investment community and the community in general can really help, is a bit of a diagnosis of which stage are you now and what do you need now that you might have not needed 18 months ago, and that's fine, but you probably do need to start thinking about now. And it might not be in the organization, and you shouldn't let loyalty force you into promoting from within necessarily.
That's part of that recruitment planning that we talk about a lot, isn't it? It's giving people the advice and looking further ahead and recognizing what your organization needs to look like.
Yeah, again, I mean, we started this conversation talking about your purpose and being really clear on your purpose. I think it's very important to be clear on that role profile and recruit to the role, not recruit to the person, because that doesn't do the organisation any favours and it doesn't do the individual any favours either. As you say, we're very good at recruiting people that we like. We have that sort of whole horns and halo effect. So we've already made up our minds based on a bit of a CV or how we have, had a handshake as we walked into the room, etc. And the whole recruitment process. I do most of my recruitment in the public sector, and they put their exec level people through 5 or 6 different stages of the recruitment process. A lot of it is very, very values driven. Whether people then live up to those values as they get into those roles is a bit of a different matter. But I think it's got to be a combination of lots and lots of different things. But we're very, very quick to blame the individual when it doesn't work out, as opposed to actually looking at ourselves and thinking, did we start this journey off on the right basis? And I think that's really, really key.
Yeah, you've not set them up for success from the beginning.
Is that something you find at xDesign? Is that something you've looked at?
Well, and we've done the same. We've promoted the most technical of engineers into people management positions, and it's just not been the right fit. Do they even want to be managers, or have we shoehorned them into this position? So it's about having those open conversations and then looking at performance management. And you want to be a manager, great. How are we going to get you there? You're maybe not there right now. Let's work together. Let's collaborate, and let's make you into the best manager that you can be. And we have an XD Leaders program that's specifically for our managers in xDesign, and that takes them through the basics, but also right up to, those difficult conversations, performance management, constructive feedback, well-being, mental health. So by the time they do become a manager, internally, they're well-placed to be a manager, to be a great manager.
Is that something that you would, in terms of advice for maybe startups or scaling businesses that are on that journey right now, what sort of advice, what should they be looking out for in terms of that planning now?
I think, well, you've probably summed it up quite well. I think when you're planning ahead, maybe 6 to 12 months ahead, and you're thinking, how many bodies am I going to have coming into the business? Who's going to manage those bodies? What's going to be my ratio to line manager to employee? What's realistic? What's manageable? And trying to kind of plan it out from there.
The only one that I have to add to that was, and I alluded to the tier level, so this is a relatively new construct for us that was brought in by John. And that 5 tiers that I talked about are not hierarchical in terms of organizational design. They're purely capability, right? So at tier 5, you need these capabilities. At tier 4, these are the capabilities. Tier 3, 2, and 1. There will never be more than 5, even if we're 1 million people.
Right.
Implementing that model unlocked more valuable conversations as to what we're missing where than any other thing we've implemented from a people structure perspective. Really? Before we had that, and we just had manager, team lead, senior, principal, reporting to a director, and all that, they were just lines in a tree, and you could put N levels of depth into that. Okay. When we collapsed all of that into 5 tiers, and it could be that a tier has multiple levels of hierarchy, that's fine, but they're all operating to a certain capability level. It just unlocked the diagnosis of issues. It very quickly became obvious that we have a tier 2 person performing a tier 3 role with no tier 4 reporting directly to a tier 5. So tier 5 is managing by delegation. There's no tier 4 to pick up and translate that to a tier 3. The tier 3 doesn't even have the capabilities to be a tier 3. How the hell do we expect this to work? Whereas before we were really quickly going to the individual and thinking we have the wrong person. Tier models unlocked the entire value discussion on organizational design in a way that I hadn't seen before.
Wow.
And I think what if that's the structure piece, I think what leadership has to bring is some really kind of core basics. We might refer to it as values or culture, etc. But things like we had a company, fantastic business called Evatix, which started in Scotland, and what they did an amazing job of what I would describe as quite brutal feedback. They just had a feedback culture. It was like everywhere. It was just like, we're just about feedback. So they would video calls with customers and then post, play through the video and, okay, Mike, you see there 3 minutes in, you said this, and then that didn't quite work. It's like, it was just part of the culture. So by setting a standard around that, could be feedback, could be performance reviews, it could be about politics and talking behind people's back. It's the job of the senior leadership to set some absolute basics, because then that will then help the middle managers and then everybody in the organisation to understand what the behaviours that you were talking about earlier.
Once you've got them in the organisation, they're starting to progress. How do you guys go about retaining that staff, retaining the quality and the talent you've got? Because we've all talked about how difficult it is to attract and get those members of the team in. How do you go about retaining them now? What's the sort of approach you take at Quorum?
For us was key to understand why were people leaving to begin with. When they were joining us, so I think it was Shane, because everything else said by Shane, but I think it was Shane that said that something around they joined first for a personality call, maybe because the founder is really exciting, then they joined for the career development. And actually we were very lucky that we identified that most people were leaving not because of a better salary, we weren't the best payer, we still are not. They were leaving their existing job because they didn't get the development they were promised. That was literally the heart of it. Yes, we might have paid more. Yes, we were interesting. Yes, we were the sexy new thing in cybersecurity in Scotland, whatever, but the reason they were leaving, not the reason they were joining, was more important. So what we made was a commitment to ourselves that many things can be true, and everybody that comes here might have a future somewhere else, but the one thing that they never will be able to say is that they haven't been developed. So for us, the strongest retention tool was we created our own academy, and everybody's career within Quorum Cyber is fundamental to their experiences. So they might leave because of a great salary somewhere else or a great role, but they won't be able to ever say that they haven't been developed.
And that is the number one thing that we get back as well, is that's why people are leaving, is exactly that. You know, they want development, they want professional development. And again, that's coming out in that report tomorrow, is exactly that. They need that professional development, you know.
Yeah.
Is that the same for you at xDesign, Hayley?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've jotted down a couple of notes here, you know, retaining your best talent, and it's so funny because salary doesn't come into it at all.
Is that right?
Really,
Yeah.
it's not one of the key reasons. It's about that kind of the structure to encourage that transparency, that communication, that listening to people through your engagement and your pulse surveys, and not just going, oh, that's great, we've received that. It's actually taking action off the back of what your people are saying, so they feel that they've been heard. I think work-life balance, flexibility as well, and that investment in your people, in their performance. We've launched a new performance framework this year. We have learning and development days and a budget, so people feel like they're continuously developing within their role as well. And we've also got a people partner to department model as well, which means you've got one person that you can go to with any problems, talk to, you build rapport, you build trust, and that really helps retain the people as well. And I think it's important to have great systems, great tools as well for any business that can be used remotely, as well as in the offices as well, as kind of remote first, and remote working is obviously after COVID is a huge thing. And I think all of that, and salary as well, but all of that kind of goes into your total kind of EVP, doesn't it?
That's we're finding again, isn't it? Is that one of the questions is asked is, can I get flexible working? Is that part of the package? And then what else comes with it? I mean, the salary is obviously part of it, but I think they're looking for other things, aren't they, when they take those roles on?
Absolutely, but I think probably salary is the thing that gets people talking to you in the first place. Let's not, you know, try and shy away from that, because if you're being dangled, you know, a 10, 15, 20k pay increase, you're going to have a conversation with somebody, and all of those other great things that you stay with an organisation for suddenly perhaps then become a wee bit less important. But I think hiring organisations are savvy to that. So yes, they're selling on the salary, but they're upselling on the benefits and the culture of the organisation as well. And I think that ability to be able to gather information is readily available. You know, there's lots of different things that people can do to look at the organisation that they're going to that's readily available now that perhaps wasn't, that you maybe had to go digging about newspapers, etc. for. But, you know, people will know the journey that you're on and want to be part of that, because it's gathering momentum, it's gathering pace, it's an exciting place to be, and it's maybe challenging them in a different way. And I think it's really, really important that people can see growth in an organisation that doesn't necessarily take them down a management route, because not everybody wants to be or has the capability to be a manager. And for me, there's a massive difference between people who lead and people who manage. Management is about operational. It's about some of the stuff that Shane spoke about, having good basics in your organisation and a well-run company that you said, Mike. Leaders are people that take businesses to that next scale, and I think there's quite a big difference between the two.
If I go back to the money conversation for a second, because I think it is sensitive, but as we're hiring across the two, in the North America and in the UK, we see different timings to those conversations quite a lot. So US was much more reactive to the layoffs, for example. So in cybersecurity, you were pretty much commanding double your salary within 6 months, even if you were terrible at your job, right? For the past 5 years, it was dramatically inflated, and the scale of that inflation was just dramatic. And that persisted in the UK when the US reacted quicker to the layoffs. And what we've noticed is there's about a year's worth of a tail until the UK reacts to salary and the money conversation the same way that the US is. So we've noticed that the US is ahead in how the UK is going to behave about it a year later in terms of salaries. Don't know if you see the same, but.
Was there any questions from the floor? I know I'm getting a nod to suggest that I need to wrap this up. Yes? Oh, I'll shout. Just shout, yeah.
I'm
There's no way to progress without that. You have nothing in place before we start. What are your views of how, I don't mean hybrid, I mean true remote first organisations will have to adapt, or can they continue to grow and scale, or do you need to at some point come back to a bit of a core?
Yeah, happy to take a first stab. The only thing I can say on this, and this is a conversation we've all been having for the past 2 years very actively, no one thing is going to be true to two businesses in this space whatsoever. What's true to your business is true to you, and I celebrate that. It will be true to nobody else, and equally no other rule will apply to you. And I think anybody trying to distill some rules out of this has a risk of becoming really dangerously arrogant in that point. So I've discussed it as a lot with Living Bridge in their portfolio, and every single firm behaves differently for the right reasons for them. We've been a hybrid since the beginning, then it served us really well in pandemic. Post-pandemic, I've missed the creativity that comes from having people in a room. I think you can really do the job as long as the job is understood anywhere, and as long as you're not recruiting on all people that don't have experience in that job. If you're trying to train people into a job, and if you're having to create new stuff, remoteness hurts us. Now, that is true to Quorum Cyber. That might be completely the opposite to the next business, right? But don't know if that helps at all.
Yeah, that's a great question, because we are remote first as well. It does come with its challenges, that building the connections, the creativity, especially for our designers, to get them in a room together for a day, for a workshop. It's invaluable. It can be done remotely. Sometimes it doesn't have the right impact for us at xDesign. Before I joined the business, we would maybe rent out a space locally before we had an office in that area, for example. So we'd get that collaboration from our teams as well, once a quarter, for example, and then just make sure there's other connections, other touch points that you have weekly, daily, whatever suits your business best to just keep people feeling connected.
I think from our point of view, it's very much about there's a purpose for you doing whatever you're doing. So if you want people to come into the space, then there's a purpose for them doing it. If you're quite happy with them working remotely, there's a purpose for that as well. And if you can define what that is, then you'll get people to follow in your culture, whatever that might be. I think bringing people into the office for the sake of it, and we've chatted about this before, people then, that starts to hurt your culture, that starts to hurt your business. And actually, if there's a reason for doing something, and it's all comes from your purpose and your values, then that's where that's your blueprint for your business. And as Federico says, it'll be different for your business as it is for Quorum.
The only other thing we did that I think worked for us, again, was we weren't afraid to make a statement on this. So I stood up in one town hall, and this was a line of a conversation, right? Culturally, you will get crucified potentially for saying one thing or the other. So CEOs are very careful, or organizations in general, to make a statement on any of this. And it got to the point where it was really annoying me to not be able to talk to what I believe was right for us. So I went in for a bit of what I think is a bit of a limb, and I said to the company in a town hall, okay, we've been pretty shy about having a statement. Here's what we want. We want people that want to be in the office. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're remote, you have to be at the office. All I want is people that want to be here. That might mean that you still don't come to the office for 2 months because for whatever reason you can't, but I don't want people that don't want to be part of a group. I don't want people that want to just work from a room. That is what I want to shape here. If that doesn't resonate with you, that's good. You now know that you probably don't want to be here long term. But going out there and saying what were some of the rules of engagement helped us be more authentic and not so afraid of making some decisions there. We still have tons of people that work remote and come to the office once a month, and that's absolutely fine, but they want to be in, and that difference was fundamental to us.
We're going to have to wrap up there, so can you just thank the panel very much for being part of this today. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks very much to Ewan and the team. Yet another masterclass on all the different issues that those who are scaling up need to address, and another reminder that my job is really quite easy by comparison to everything that everybody here is addressing and grappling with.